Johnstown. Once one of the Keystone State's largest cities, it has had a long and storied history. This city, roughly 50 miles east of Pittsburgh, was once one of the most prosperous areas in Pennsylvania. Today, it is quite a different story. This is what happened to Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown, Pennsylvania was established in the early 1800s on the Conemaugh River and the Stony Creek. Like many cities in Pennsylvania in their early history, it would grow with the growth of steel, iron, and coal. While the city prospered well in its early history, in 1889 it would experience one of the worst disasters to ever occur in a city. On May 31st of that year, the nearby South Fork Dam would collapse, sending a rush of water that would take just over 2,200 lives and hundreds upon hundreds of buildings with it. The damage and destruction was extensive, and showed that even a prospering and growing city could still have its setbacks. Despite this disaster, from 1870 to 1920, the city would grow by more than a factor of 10, from just over 6,000 all the way to just over 67,000. This would largely be due to the city's early and effective grasp of the iron and steel industry with its Cambria Iron Company. This company made Johnstown a hub for iron and steel, and was a trailblazer in metallurgy. This would help it become one of America's largest rail manufacturers for a time. Thousands would find work in Johnstown just through this company alone, and many others would find work through supporting industries such as coal mining and logging. All was well in Johnstown throughout much of the early 1900s, even though the steel industry had widely expanded to other cities in the Rust Belt by this time. The 1930s, though, would slowly begin the city's long decline from peak. The Great Depression would hurt the country and the city. However, what made things worse for Johnstown was when flooding once again would ravage the city in 1936. 25 were lost in the destruction, along with millions worth of property. It was after this, though, that heavy investment in flood prevention infrastructure would be undertaken to prevent another tragedy of such proportions. Johnstown would see a bump in steel production for World War II. However, the post-war deindustrialization of the Rust Belt would take its toll. Outsourcing, foreign competition, the Clean Air Act, location, and other factors would all make Johnstown less attractive for business. To make things worse, in 1977, flooding again would ravage the city, this time taking 84 lives and causing hundreds of millions of dollars in property losses. Though the flooding infrastructure had improved since the last flood, with multiple nearby dams compromising at the same time, the system was overloaded. All of these economic and infrastructure factors would lead to thousands of job losses at Cambria Iron, now under Bethlehem Steel. Throughout the 70s and early 80s, a roughly 80% reduction in its labor force would occur. Coal mining would also have its decline as well, with technological changes requiring less workers. Finally, the famous former Cambria iron plants were closed for good in 1992, leaving miles of steel and iron plants left to waste. Double-digit percentage population losses would occur every decade from 1950 to 2010. Today the city is less than a third the size it was at its peak, and it is still losing more people. So what happened? For one, the city is simply in a bad location, being located in a narrow flood-prone valley. It's also not as accessible as other cities, which have ports, and are less inhibited by mountainous terrain. The city also lived and died with Rust Belt industry. As steel, iron, and coal fell on hard times, so has Johnstown. Today exists a city that appears much larger than it actually is, now under 20,000 people. It remains to be seen how much farther they can go. Thank you for watching.